Hey sis, what can you and I take from Carl Jung? Not necessarily what he stood for, not necessarily what he personally believed, but I'm talking about his actual psychological archetypes that he had for people, meaning the different parts of people and how they show up. Take a listen to this week's essay. Everything is timestamped below. There is one particular archetype that Carl Jung had called the Benefactor, and this deeply resonates with Black women, our experiences, Black womanhood, and even to a certain extent, why we coddle and baby Black men and boys over and above ourselves. I'll catch you on the other side for my final commentary. Hey sis, if I told you that Carl Jung's theory of archetypes, when applied through a Black womanhood lens, could change the way we understand ourselves, our relationships, and even the roles we unconsciously play in the world, would you believe me? Who we are, our history, and how we move through the world, once applied to Black women, could cause a shift, a big one. Not in a vague self-help way, in a structural way, in a behavioural way, in a cultural way, in a positive, self-led and sovereign way, the best way. The question then becomes, who benefits the most from us never noticing our patterns via Jung's theory in the first place? Black women, Black men, or the world that depends on our labour and input? The main group that profits is not the focus today. They are a sidebar to what happens to us as women when we do notice Jung's archetype in us individually and collectively. That's the threshold. That would probably spark a major shift for Black women around the diaspora, individually and collectively. So how do Black women fit into the Jungian theory? In Jung's psychoanalysis, we meet the benefactor archetype. This is the part of a person who is deemed as a helper, dedicated to the cause of others at the cost of their own suffering. They tend to pour all their resources, talents, time, love, and service into others, expecting very little in return. The benefactor gives, not occasionally, not when they feel like it, but as a default behaviour with how they move through life. Sound familiar? When we place this archetype inside the lived reality of Black womanhood, something becomes highly visible, a pattern, and our pattern as benefactors. Take, for example, nurturing. Black women provide care, empathy, and extend themselves to the causes of others profoundly. This cannot be disputed. On a social and political level, this could be with injustices, whether the injustices directly impacts us or not. Let's take things like Black Lives Matter and advocacy for Black and brown people, especially men. Around the diaspora, it's us who does the advocacy the loudest, and I would argue the best. We defend Black and brown people, no matter where we are in the world. You could also look at the African American women and their 92% turnout to defend women's rights. Meanwhile, non-Black women chose maleness, whiteness, and religion. In other words, patriarchy as the priority over women and their autonomy, by lending their vote in opposition to Black women's, therefore against women's best interests generally. On a cultural level, this could be with our preoccupation with everyone else in the community, bar us and our needs, especially when it comes to how we prioritise the needs of males and boys over women and young girls. Or it could be how we overlook the harm done to women and girls or the femicide rates globally when harm or a fatality is caused by a male within the community. Ashley Janae and her case highlighted this a lot, which I covered in my essay, No, Black Women Are Not Automatically Safer with Black Men. If you are on Substack, it will be linked directly into this essay. And if you are on YouTube, there will be a link to this in the description box. So lastly, Being of service and caregiving. Family, friends, partners, children, it all comes here. This could be the same for any woman, it could be said. However, for Black women, there is a clear nuance to our service in quotation marks. For us as women, our service often looks like do more and expect less. Accept less and be happy. Don't expect more than what's on offer. Be of service even when it hurts. Yes, this can all relate to men, which is what you're probably thinking, but it's deeper than that. We have work, friends, family, the list goes on. Apply this to various areas of your own life. What do you notice? Are you or have you been of service in a nuanced way related to Black womanhood in more than just a romantic relationship? You let me know in the comments if you're on YouTube. Emotional labour. Dealing with the negativity placed on Black women that comes from inside and outside of the community. This is something that we face. Dealing with connections and relationships, which mean we often have to endure rather than seek something better. A lot of the emotional labour placed on Black women is a cultural expectation, deeply ingrained in history, how we've been raised, religion, the lack of prioritising women's needs collectively and individually. These are just three simple areas of Black womanhood. When placed under Jung's theory, can therefore show us exactly why and how Black womanhood is linked to this archetype. The benefactor archetype becomes clearer when we look at how we got here. How we've been socialised into this archetype psychologically, if we rely on Jung's theory around the behaviours of the benefactor, can easily point us to history. But that would be too simple, too easy, and too obvious to do. Just taking into consideration things like slavery, and one point in history would not fully hold things like culture, religion, and Black men to account for their conditioning of Black women's minds and behaviours. This doesn't mean holding these things to account in a way that blames, not in a way that makes Black women look like damsels in distress or silly. It's about taking these other areas into account and into consideration in a factual way, a realistic way, an unapologetic way, which will allow Black women to see the shadow side of the benefactor archetype. That's where not only the awakening happens, the shift will start to take place, not in theory, but in practice, in your life, in her life, and every Black woman's around the diaspora. If we look at the life cycle of a Black woman, the foundations of the benefactor are introduced when we are young. Culturally, within the community, Black girls are required to, or either believed to be, more mature, or that they mature earlier. What's interesting is it's the reverse for boys. Boys are often relegated to a state of arrested development and seen as less mature and therefore babied in quotation marks a lot more. One study called Girl Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girlhood, and I will link this in the description box, they confirm from their research into the Black community and externally a pattern around thoughts about Black girls. What they found is there's an idea that Black girls need less nurturing, Black girls need less protection, Black girls need to be supported less, Black girls need to be comforted less, and that Black girls are more independent. From a young age, Black girls are then pushed into independence. As a domino impact, they are then pushed into the caregiving role of the benefactor archetype naturally, as she is seen as more mature in quotation marks. This can lead to things like emotional parentification. Younger Black girls are at risk of being placed in a role reversal with a parent and or given the responsibility as if they were a parent for other things. Now again, apply this to your life, especially if you're the eldest daughter or if you have an elder sister. What do you notice about this? And you let me know in the comments. The strong Black woman. So by the time a Black girl moves into womanhood, there's a trope that she knows well. We all know it well. One that I have covered in detail in my footnotes for Black Women Zine, which is still free to read online, and there will be a link in the description box to this. And the trope is the strong Black woman. This is the starting point after we move past Black girlhood. Even if you were not shown this trope by other women around you growing up, or your own mother didn't take on this trope and you saw it, Black culture teaches you it. The cultural expectations of Black women shape her mind, viewpoint, and the way she operates sometimes outside of the community. She becomes the fixer, the doer, the one to turn to, the strong sidekick. This can then spill into workplace overperformance, workplace exploitation of her service in quotation marks, because remember, the benefactor accepts less and is prepared to do more. Then we have men, work, family, friends. Everyone benefits from the benefactor from this standpoint of do more and expect less. Black womanhood then becomes about this role from a 360-degree perspective in all areas of life. This is how Jung's theory carries on as a grown woman. Sis, apply this. Where in your life are you still performing this trope and or Jung's actual archetype for the benefactor? The role of the church. Now, this is very important. Religion, while notorious for how it shapes women's behaviour in general, has a very harsh sting for Black women. Non-Black women are seen as damsels, in quotation marks, as women that need to be kept under the authority of men as a disguise for protection, in quotation marks, or because it's their place in the world, in quotation marks. This is how they are seen as an archetype within religion or how they are treated within society and their own communities. Fragile, soft. She doesn't get her hands dirty in a cultural context. This is for the men. They provide, they protect, they make the laws and the ways of the world, and women just sit back and observe. Black women, on the other hand, we are not damsels, we are not saved, we are not protected, and we are not provided for, generally speaking, and statistics would easily show this. We don't just sit back and observe in our cultural context. As an expectation, we participate, we do, we give, we hold things up. Both groups of women, Black and non-Black, endure, yes. However, it must be noted in different ways. This is because the cultural expectations for Black women and non-Black women are often very different within their own communities. If we look at key Bible verses, which I have covered in essays focused on Ephesians and Colossians, and if you are on YouTube, those videos may pop up on the right-hand side as I'm speaking now. If you are on Substack, they are linked directly in the essay, and I will make sure that there's a direct link in the description box. These essays show quite clearly how the interpretations of certain verses, when placed in a Black cultural context, impact Black women in a very different way. Religion, then, encourages the benefactor archetype in Black women due to how we are seen and our role within the Black community. We can also absorb a lot of negative energy in the name of God, in quotation marks, because we are the community benefactor. What we absorb often causes pain. It causes endurance for Black women. It causes an explanation and an excuse for mistreatment and infidelity. It encourages the benefactor archetype mindset and behaviour in Black women with maximum effect. Why? Black culture. It's always going to link back to this and how Black women are seen, used, and called upon. So ask yourself, who benefits from our endurance in the name of religion? Who currently has or has done in the past? The journey to the benefactor archetype and how we got here And just these few examples can be rooted in the overall life cycle of Black women, the expectations of Black women and girls at various life stages, and then add to this the impact of religion and that age-old trope that still is attached to us today, the strong Black woman. The benefactor in relationships. This is probably one of the most important things for Black women to understand. If Jung's theory tells us that the key behaviours and psychological fixation for the benefactor archetype are a desire to extend themselves, often at the cost of themselves and self-sacrifice, and that they dedicate their talents, time, energy, resources to the causes of others, this is where we will find Black women sitting deeply in benefactor energy. Looking at how statistics and research, as well as cultural expectations, show how many of us function in relationships to men also shows us a lot. Then finally, if we take into consideration how Black women often view men. Here's the thing though, when we look at the benefactor archetype in relationships, Black women will become separated into two different camps. We have the original benefactors, knee-deep in their devotion to men over themselves, happily carrying out the benefactor behaviours in their relationships, in connections with men, while receiving little to nothing in return, or receiving a lot less than she knows that she deserves. But she hopes to receive something, so she will carry on with a mindset that tells her they are kings, in quotation marks, and they are to be protected at all costs, in quotation marks, over and above the protection of themselves and or other Black women and girls. In the second camp, we have what we could call the sovereign women, who have recognised the patterns and released themselves from the benefactor behaviours in relation to men and how they view them. Usually, the release for these women was down to some kind of personal awakening that they had or they are currently having with a man, or they've simply removed their rose-tinted glasses over the cultural conditioning placed on Black women when it comes to men, or possibly women that fall into this camp, they have spent a significant amount of time with research studies on society, religion, marriage, and dating. In some cases, women in this group may have done all the above. Let's just call them the rebels in this camp. Most Black women, sadly, will probably be found in the first camp. What keeps them there will be various things, usually linked to cultural expectations that they don't want to break or disappoint others with. It could be to do with men, religion, the strong Black woman trope, or they could simply identify very strongly with the benefactor, and this is her mindset and personality based on where she's at in life. In the depths of your own memory, think about the times that you have found yourself overgiving, trying to heal men or hoping that he will heal, or even worse, praying that he will heal, staying too long, becoming emotionally responsible for other things, sacrificing something or yourself just to make it work, dealing with men who are takers, not givers. Whenever you have felt guilty around holding a boundary, or you've been made to feel guilty by someone else for doing this, think about times where you've ever felt like you wanted to be chosen, in quotation marks, through service, in quotation marks again, or you've used service as a way to please others, especially men. Hold on to that memory. Then ask yourself, where or how did I learn to do this? That, sis, is your personal threshold to cross over from the original benefactor camp to the sovereign woman's. This memory is also your pattern, your shadow, and it will show you how you personally have in the past or currently do show up as the benefactor archetype in relationships with men and how you view men. Keep this with you. If for Black women, usefulness becomes identity, then relationships become a place where women can unconsciously audition for the role of being useful in quotation marks. This is because she identifies with this as her role as a Black woman. Notice your threshold, notice your benefactor pattern, notice how you show up in relationships, and stop auditioning. Jung's theory can hold up a wonderful mirror to any woman who is hoping to become sovereign. That said, what I will say, remember what I mentioned last week in my daily note for Black women, number 126. Not everyone is going to like it when you see clearly in that mirror and release the benefactor behavior, when you decide that you would rather be respected rather than liked, or when you'd rather be a sovereign woman archetype rather than the benefactor. And lastly, they definitely won't like it when you're ready to stop being valued in your community and by men and society at large purely for your strength and endurance. The shadow side of the benefactor. Who are you when no one needs you, sis? Back to this essay's core question. Along with, what about your state of mind? How you feel after you've given so much as a benefactor? The shadow side of the benefactor archetype can be cruel. Yes, she will get fed up. Yes, she will become run down. Yes, she will become overworked and exhausted. Life will pass by. She will not live it. She will not participate in it or experience it. A woman stuck in this role or this psychology, she just moves through life, pushing forward with nothing but martyrdom as her own motivation. What isn't often focused on is the psychological impact of the benefactor on Black women. As few examples, she could become bitter generally about life, envious, resentful, or shaming of other women who are free, in quotation marks, or even consider themselves as more sovereign. She can become resentful deep down for all she does, especially for men, with little return if this is a repeated pattern for her. Anger could be something that she has that is in desperate need of being unpacked, and or it's often anger that is directed at others, not the root cause, which is actually this woman's patterns. If this continues long enough, a woman can enter a stage where she has no real identity other than her martyrdom. Mentally and emotionally, this will negatively impact a woman, no matter how much she hides behind the benefactor role as something she enjoys or feels is her role as a Black woman. If she wakes up, she becomes sovereign. If she stays asleep, she may develop a pattern in all of her relationships that are romantic or platonic, work, friends, family, etc. And this pattern can lead to repeated heartbreak, attracting the same type of man or friends, but yet she cannot understand why. So going back to the original question, who are you as a Black woman when no one needs you? The shadow side of the benefactor archetype lives here. How this can show up is feeling guilt when resting, a woman who doesn't know how to receive, hyper-independence in a woman to never be too much, in quotation marks, for friends, family, or for men, but nothing is ever too much for her to provide to others, or it's never too much for her to do stuff in order to maintain a relationship or a connection. A woman like this, she will break. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Ask yourself, are you sitting at this threshold? And if so, what's stopping you from crossing over from the benefactor to the sovereign woman? One key question is, why does the benefactor impact Black women specifically? It's no mystery why Jung's archetype can be applied to Black womanhood and girlhood very effectively. As mentioned, our historical labour as working hands, whether this be on the plantation, in white spaces where we are needed for support in the modern day, or the corporate world. All this installs a familiar feeling for many Black women to be the benefactor. Our servitude to our community, men, religion, and being the main caregivers for households with disproportional rates of Black women as lone parents. All this reinforces the benefactor behaviour in Black women naturally. Then we have the mammy stereotype, which will prioritise boys and men over girls and women, and also Black male issues over women's issues. This also will reinforce a benefactor and the behaviour attached to this with maximum effect. So, where does this lead? If this happens or continues to happen, leads to the underprotection of Black women and girls. Femicide rates go ignored. Harm done to girls and women remains unspoken about, simply because some of us would rather follow the crowd as a woman than be the one to stand out as the black sheep, the rebel, the sovereign, the one who will not leave Black women and girls unaccounted for. You could also call her the wild one, who's actively causing an anomaly in the Black culture and definitely the Black manosphere's talking points that harm Black women. The thing is, it all adds up. The mind and nervous system are keeping scores. For the benefactors of the community, they overlook the scores and they call it life, their duty, being ride or die, or being loyal. Know this truth, sis. Black women are often socially rewarded for survival behaviours that quietly disconnect them from themselves. That is the benefactor. That is the conditioning, and that is the culture. See the patterns, connect the dots, identify your personal pattern, move from understanding and recognition to implementation of course correcting for your own well-being. So, what does the benefactor need to embody? Under Jung's theory, this psychological archetype must understand their shadow, and they must understand that this includes things like self-sacrifice, lack of asserting their needs, and being mindful of where and how they forget themselves. If the goal of the benefactor is to be useful, responsible, a caregiver, things like boundaries, standards, expectations, having more love for other women and girls, and a plain and hard no from time to time, all these things could be the starting point for any Black woman who can see the benefactor in themselves, to help her see where she can overextend herself or even underextend herself towards herself and other women and girls. Under Jung's theory, the benefactor must learn to receive, rest, recognize what pleasure and softness that is not performative but meaningful actually looks like. The tools and skills to do this will not come from endless theory understanding. For the benefactor, what they need to do is actually implement and apply new ways of moving through the world, which will in turn reset her whole identity of who she is. So then she will be able to answer the question, who are you when you are not needed, caring, or carrying? When I penned the essay, Are You Addicted to Being Needed or Performing a Good Woman? This spoke directly to the benefactor archetype in Black women. And if you are on YouTube, I will make sure that I'll place a link to this essay in the description box. If you're on Substack, it will be in the written version of this article. Now, in this essay, what I focused on was highlighting how the addiction to being needed can be so subtle you don't even realize it until you zoom out and look at where your motivation for your actions is actually coming from. Gaining this wholeness as a woman takes time, and it's not done in full isolation all the time. Engaging with other women who are further along the path, or women who have completed the path, or maybe even women who are in the same place as you, will always benefit any Black woman who sees the benefactor archetype in them. Keep this close, sis. Remember this. The evolution of the benefactor is not about being selfish. It is about becoming whole. So hey sis, if you've made it this far, then thank you so much for staying here with me. No, I have not had an outfit change between the intro, the essay, and now me appearing here on camera. Literally, I'm recording this on another day because I realised I didn't even introduce myself. So welcome, I am the Black Woman Essayist. I am the creator of Notes on Black Women over on Substack. So now I've got that out of the way, let me know what you think of the benefactor. In your honest opinion, have you ever experienced this kind of archetype? Is it something that you think resonates with Black women? I think that it highly does resonate with us, but it's not the only one of Jung's archetypes. That's the other thing I want to say. I keep mispronouncing this guy's name because when I'm reading out my work, I'm just seeing the J and saying Jung. Anyway, this is not the only archetype, is what I want to say, that I think resonates from Carl Jung's work with Black women. There are a few others which I've covered on Substack over on Notes on Black Women, and I will be bringing them here to you as well on YouTube. But this is the main one. This is the main one. Now, in terms of what we do about it, because there's always something that I think about when I make these discoveries or I think of these things, it's down to recognition, you know? I would say pattern recognition is going to be the big thing. Once anybody, not just Black women, but once anyone is able to recognize a pattern and then try and interrupt it or break it, that's where we can create change. But at the same time, it's also about remembering not to feel guilty about these changes that we have to make, because sometimes these changes can be significantly beneficial, not just to us, but to other women in the diaspora and also to younger Black women, because I'm of a certain age. I've lived quite a bit of life. I may not look like it, but I am actually probably older than you would imagine me to be. And so I do think about younger Black women, and I do think about what they're coming into and how things can be sort of shifted so they don't have the same experiences that maybe my mother had or my grandmother had, or even that I had or you had or your grandmother and your mum, you know, because the benefactor is, it's quite a damaging place to be, I think, psychologically for a woman. And obviously when a woman's psyche is, what's the word I'm looking for? A woman's psyche is focused on everything and everyone else but herself. Other things about her and other things about her life also take a back seat, and that would be something that would concern me and that I wouldn't want to happen for myself and other women or other younger Black women. So you let me know in the comments what you think about this week's essay and what you think about this analysis that I've done. And if you do like this kind of content, then please, why not consider subscribing, give the video a like, drop me your comments, share it with someone who may enjoy it. And lots of love to you. Thank you for being here. I'll catch you in the next one.